Have you ever felt it? That shift in the air, the veil between worlds thinning? Ever wonder why some things seem magnified late at night? Sounds of footsteps, scraping nails on the walls, and even whispers in the dark. For centuries, often around midnight or 3 a.m., it has been whispered about as a time of heightened spiritual activity. A time when magic is real and the unseen world draws closer. The legends, the lore, the terrifying stories that haunt the night. So join us as we embrace the darkness and explore the magic, the madness, and the mystery of the witching hour. Be sure to rate us and subscribe to the show so you never miss a tale from beyond the walls of sleep.
Welcome to the witching hour.
Welcome to the Dreamscape Chronicles Patreon edition, where apparently my insomnia gets academic validation. I'm Vi, your friendly neighborhood numinous apprentice of occult and esoteric studies, still figuring out which way's up in the astral.
And I'm Percival, your nocturnal squire, guiding you through our madness into the occult, esoteric, mysticism, and the fine art of staring into the abyss until it stares back. Trigger warning, this episode does involve animal sacrifice, blood rituals, and or dead things. You have been warned. Proceed with caution. We're talking about Necromantia, better known as Necromancy, but more specifically, Dream Necromancy.
Which, for the record, is way creepier than it sounds, and it already sounds like the setup for a Netflix horror series. So, there's that.
We're not just talking dreams. We're summoning the dead for counsel, prophecy, or forbidden knowledge. Basically, Dream Necromancy, but with all the terrifying charm of an Evil Dead sequel, minus Bruce Campbell swinging a chainsaw in your bedroom.
Shop smart. Shop S-Mart.
If only it were that simple. To the ancients, the dream was not simply a theater of the subconscious. It was a legitimate temple of encounter, porous, dangerous, and sacred.
Basically, bedtime wasn't about counting sheep. It was about inviting the shades of your ancestors to tell you where they stashed the family silver.
Exactly. Tonight, we'll trace the history, looking at grimoires like the Picatrix or Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, how the practice is viewed through modern psychology, and finally, how people still experiment with it today.
Plus, we'll try to answer important questions like, if you fall asleep on a grave, do you earn ghost loyalty points?
Not quite sure that would work, but sure, why not? The root of the Dream Necromancy digs straight into antiquity, damp, dark, and usually underground. The Greeks and Romans didn't see dreams as random brain noise. They treated them as direct transmissions from the gods, daimones, or the dead.
So every dream was basically a link for the spirit world to commune. You just had to figure out whether it was Zeus, a demon, or grandma.
And if you wanted to make sure the connection was made with the spirit, you didn't just sleep anywhere. You descended into caves, literal mouths of the underworld. Places like Tainaron or Acheron were considered thresholds where the living could brush against the dead in sleep.
And let's be clear, this wasn't glamping. You're stretched out on a cold cavern floor, maybe on raw earth with rats, waiting for some shadowy ancestor to clock in for the night shift.
Commitment indeed. The Greek magical papyri, those late antiquity period spellbooks written in Greek, Coptic, and Demotic, preserved the details. You find rituals that specifically call on the psyche, the shades of the dead, to appear in dreams. The magician might pour libations of milk, honey, wine, and in more demanding rites, blood. The logic was simple. The dead are nourished by offerings, and in exchange, they answer.
Which is a lot less dream pillow spray and a lot more fresh lamb sacrifice.
Indeed. Some spells in the papyri even prescribed sleeping on the ground after the offering, calling on chthonic daimones, or basically underworld intermediaries, neither god nor human. The ancients didn't assume these figures were figments of mind. They believed they were real entities, the dead themselves, gods in disguise, or spirits bound to the underworld.
So if you got a dream, it wasn't just your subconscious, it was a house call from whatever lived below.
And the caves amplified it. Being underground was a symbolic burial, a rehearsal of death. By sleeping where spirits were thought to pass, the dreamers set themselves in their path. The expectation wasn't metaphor, it was operational necromancy. Summon, sleep, receive.
And if you woke up with a cryptic message instead of a ghostly chat, guess you just misdialed the underworld hotline.
Or worse, the wrong daimon picked up, and those calls had consequences. If we look at the PGM, the Greek magical papyri, it gives us actual blueprints for contacting the dead in dreams. And some of them read like ritual survival manuals. For instance, with Hecate, one text prescribes pouring a mix of milk, honey, and wine directly onto the earth, addressing the dead as
Spirits below, you who dwell in darkness, you who are nameless and wandering, come forth, appear to me in my sleep, teach me what I ask.
Now we're haunted. The magician then lies flat, face to the ground without speaking a word. The silence is crucial. It signals surrender and openness to the underworld current.
Silence, dirt floor, and an open invite to the underworld. It's not exactly self-care Sunday. More like ancient planking.
Self-care was survival. The act of lying on the earth wasn't just uncomfortable. It was ritual death. To imitate the grave, to press your body against the soil was to blur the line between living and dead. That blur is where the dreams opened.
So less lucid dream practice and more pretend to be a corpse until something notices.
Dead on. And something usually did. These dreams weren't treated as imagination. They were understood as direct encounters. The spirits brought visions of war outcomes, judgment, or guidance for vengeance. This was necromancy as applied intelligence gathering strategy, not as modern culture sees it as the raising of the dead.
Ghost intel. Shadow ops, literally.
Well put. And the mechanics weren't vague. Some rites demanded blood offerings. The life essence to empower the apparition. Black animals especially, lambs, roosters, their blood poured as payment for the shade's voice. To the ancients, blood wasn't symbolic. It was the coin of the underworld. Without it, the dead had no strength to manifest.
Which really raises the stakes. If you're putting blood in the ground and then going to bed, you're not hoping for a dream. You're bribing the underworld to send a messenger.
Correct, and the magician wasn't always selective. Some spells in the papyri literally say, "Any spirit, whoever you are, appear in my dreams." That's about as safe as leaving your front door wide open in a bad neighborhood.
Yeah, that's not your ancestor. That's like having an open invitation house party and seeing mostly strangers attend just to drink your booze and trash the living room.
Which is why protective frameworks were critical. Operators often invoked Hermes Chthonius as the psychopomp to guide the spirits properly, or Persephone to sanction the contact, or Hecate to bind the apparitions. Without divine gatekeepers, you risked binding yourself to something unwanted, a restless shade, a diamond that clung.
Like a spectral squatter refusing to leave your headspace.
And the caves were key here too. Sites like Acheron weren't just random pits. They were believed to be actual cosmic intersections where the dead could pass through more easily. To perform dream rites in such a place wasn't just for atmosphere, it was logistical. You set up shop on the ghost highway, so to speak.
Right. Why wait for a ghost to knock on your door when you can bring the door to them?
Yes. And the ancients weren't naive. They knew it was risky. That's why the rituals included not only invocations, but dismissal formula, prayers and names to banish whatever came, ensuring it didn't linger after the dream. The ritual wasn't over when you awoke. You had to sever that link. You carried the underworld back with you.
Which is maybe the most relatable part. Nobody wants a clingy dream guest or unwanted parasite. Boundaries are important even with the dead.
That's what sets these necromantic dream rites apart. They weren't about imagination. They weren't about inner symbolism. They were operational practices, steps, offerings, protections, dismissals, designed to turn sleep into a deliberate portal.
All right, book club time. Let's start dropping some titles before people think we're just winging it here.
Certainly. My pleasure. So, the Picatrix, or Gayet al-Hakim, The Aim of the Wise, is one of the most important books ever written on astrological magic. Composed in Arabic in Andalusia around 1000 AD, the Picatrix, an encyclopedic work, considerably larger than most other medieval grimoires or books of magic. It was translated to Latin in 1256 for the Castilian king Alfonso the Wise. The Picatrix is not a light read, compiling 4 books filled with astrological elections, talismanic formulas, ritual incantations, and planetary correspondence. It serves as a manual for astrological magic, aiming to align the practitioner with celestial forces, so that the microcosm may harmonize with the macrocosm. However, this is not a text for casual practitioners. It assumes a foundational knowledge of astrology and astronomy. Without a deep understanding of how celestial influences operate, the Picatrix can be nearly inaccessible to the average reader or practitioner.
So kind of like planetary IKEA instructions, but instead of a bookshelf, you're assembling visions in your sleep. And it happens to be easier to do if you are already a carpenter. Otherwise, it takes a near rocket scientist to understand those manuals.
Yes, except if you mistime Saturn's hour, you don't end up with missing screws. You end up with missing sanity. The Picatrix outlines talismans that can be consecrated specifically to affect dreams, for prophecy, for contact, or for instructions from spirits. For example, crafting a silver lunar disc engraved on a Monday during the moon's hour, then sleeping with it beneath your pillow to open the dream gate. Basically, a portal. Yeah, I know.
Fucking portals, man. Wait. You're telling me you're a jeweler, but you've never made a talisman for communicating with the dead? Where's my magical talisman? I like shiny things with a dark and potentially treacherous purpose.
I'll get right on that just as soon as I regain my own sanity.
And here I thought magical entrepreneurship was your side hustle.
Then there's the Book of Abramelin, an ancient grimoire that outlines a rigorous system aimed at purifying the magician to attain communication with the Holy Guardian Angel. This practice is not a quick or simple one. It typically spans several months and demands deep personal sacrifice and dedication. Central to the process are extended periods of abstinence and fasting, which are intended to cleanse the body and the mind. During this time, the practitioner must engage in a series of invocations, ritualistic prayers, and chants designed to call upon spiritual entities and establish a connection with the divine. A significant component of the work is the use of word squares, intricate symbolic puzzles that require intense concentration and serve to stabilize the mind. The entire system is structured to purify the magician's consciousness, ensuring they are mentally and spiritually prepared for the ultimate goal, direct encounters with their holy guardian angel through dreams and visions. These dream states are seen as a gateway to the divine knowledge, offering guidance, wisdom, and insight, but only to those who have diligently followed the demanding regimen of the Abramelin operation. The process is not just a magical or spiritual pursuit. It is a transformative journey, deeply testing the practitioner's will, discipline, and inner resolve.
Months? That's not ritual, that's a lifestyle blog with extra candles and what sounds like a divine crossword puzzle. Imagine the Instagram though, like hashtag 18-month purity challenge. Day 127, still haven't spoken to anyone alive. Spirit's still ignoring me. Hashtag blessed.
Commitment is part of the discipline. Dream Necromancy isn't a hobby, it's an operational magic.
Operational magic. Or highly elaborate ghost cosplay. You decide.
Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy laid out a full system of cosmic correspondence. Planets, herbs, stones, spirits, geometries. Dreams were woven into this web. All ritual timing, incense, and symbols were designed to tune the dream ecosystem.
So all those weird diagrams and candles weren't for aesthetics. They're basically cheat codes for sleep. Press triangle during Saturn's hour to call Grandpa. Hold L2 for prophetic visions.
Close enough.
And if I press the wrong combo? Game over. Ghost tutorial level failed. Total knockout.
Ficino and later the Golden Dawn formalized these techniques. Lucid dreaming, astral projection, body of light, structured training for navigating dream necromancy safely.
Oh, so the Renaissance was basically a Hogwarts for ghost summoning. And here I thought the curriculum was just Latin and awkward dinners with dead philosophers.
Far more dangerous, but yes, very Hogwarts-esque.
Well, let's dive deep into this well-dug grave. I want to talk about what these rituals actually entailed. What did they look like in practice?
Well, there were 3 primary categories of rites. First up, incubation rituals, which we discussed on episode 17 if you'd like to hear more about the history of that process. But in short, dream incubation rituals are practices used to influence dreams for guidance or insight. They involve setting a clear intention before sleep, often with prayer, symbols, meditation, and sometimes fasting or sleeping in sacred spaces. The goal is to invite meaningful, purposeful dreams.
Ah, yes, dream incubation. Because why pay for therapy when you can starve yourself and beg the void for cryptic bedtime riddles? In all seriousness, mental health is no joke and should not be neglected. Make sure that you are taking care of yourself physically and mentally.
Absolutely. In the second category, talismanic operations, which is directly lifted from the Picatrix. This involved engraving silver during the hour of the moon, inscribing sigils on it, and then placing the finished talisman beneath your head while you slept. The goal? To make contact with your ancestors.
See, this is where having a talisman would come in handy. You know, if I had one, just saying, throwing that out there.
And then third, purification and fasting. This one is the more extreme. The Abramelin ritual requires months of strict austerity. No sex, no rich foods. The idea is that a purified body makes a clearer, sharper dream, a better channel for spirits.
So necromancy is basically like visiting a medieval rehab center, just dreaming with the spirits instead of group therapy hour?
Then there's sigil-based dream work, a technique that chaos magicians use. You draw a sigil like, I seek counsel from my ancestors, charge it with energy, burn it, and then sleep with the intention of receiving guidance in your dreams. It's a fast track, but also risky. If your mind isn't properly prepared, the results can be, let's say, unpredictable, which is why necromancers always emphasize verification, repetition, community input, cross-checking with other practitioners. It's like a peer review process, but for the dead.
You know, that's the part that cracks me up. The dead, they don't just show up uninvited. You don't just chant a few words and hope for a visit. The magician tests and verifies and checks their findings with others. It's kind of like a spectral academia.
Beautifully put. And finally, we have the astral projection rites. These involve building your body of light, preparing yourself with banishings and protective symbols, and then consciously descending into the dream space or astral plane. You basically suit up for a spiritual journey.
Ah, perfect. Like supernatural sunscreen. Try to protect where you can. SPF meaning spirit protection factor here.
A fitting analogy, but there's a real danger here. Ancient texts warn of nightmares, obsessions, and even madness. If you summon the wrong shade, you don't get a wise ancestor. Instead, you might end up with a restless spirit, one who might pass ailments like gout or chronic discomfort.
I wonder if that's why sometimes milk disagrees with me. Because my great Aunt Ida's restless spirit was lactose intolerant, and now I can't have cheese.
Milk, the new holy water, for ancestral spirits who linger in your gut. It will sure make you feel like you're expelling a shade. Talk about having a shade.
Are you throwing shade if you're throwing it up?
Hold on, I have to go take a shade.
Oh. Oh my gosh.
There were plenty of accounts that have survived through the ages. Pliny, for example, wrote about men who would lie on graves hoping for prophetic dreams to emerge from the dead. Then there are Byzantine sources that talk about sorcerers invoking shades during visions, tapping into spirits for guidance. Even during the Renaissance, magicians admitted, behind closed doors of course, that dream necromancy was still in practice, though they didn't exactly broadcast it.
Oh, I love the slightly shady stories. My favorite has to be the monks who were accused of summoning the spirits of dead abbots in their sleep, and it was just to ask them about missing manuscripts. I mean, hey, even monks in their quiet cloisters have to spice things up sometimes, right?
Yes, but there's an important distinction here. Necromancy wasn't about drama or theatrical display. It wasn't a grand show. The whole point was knowledge, accessing hidden wisdom, not some macabre performance for an audience. Dream necromancy in particular was considered less invasive than physically disturbing graves, but it still came with its own risks.
Yeah, it's kind of like medieval self-care with a side of danger. You're tapping into the unknown, but without digging up the dead for it. Still a whole lot of peril if you don't do it right.
And that's a good point. Those risks were always present. The rituals could be perilous, even if they weren't as visually dramatic as grave robbing. Medieval manuals often read like warnings more than instructions. They were full of advice like, perform this ritual, but not too often, or you might kill yourself.
So it was basically the medieval equivalent of modern workout plans. Do 3 sets of necromancy, but don't overdo it or you'll throw your body or your soul into a crisis.
Moderation definitely was key, whether it was for your body's health or your spiritual well-being. Push too far and you risk tipping into madness or worse. But if done correctly, with the right protections and rituals, it was a safe way to access knowledge beyond the living world. Okay, so modern psychology. Let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
So when we step into the modern age, psychology reshapes the whole conversation. Carl Jung saw dreams not as random images, but as the living language of the unconscious, messages rising up from the depths of the self. Within that framework, summoning the dead in a dream isn't just eerie spectacle. It's shadow work at its most refined, a direct encounter with everything we've repressed or forgotten.
Right, because whether it's some parasitic ghost or just my own psyche dressed up in funeral clothes, the effect is the same. I've still got a corpse knocking on my dream door demanding to be heard.
Jung went even further. He suggested that the dead act as mediators, linking us to the collective unconscious, the shared reservoir of ancestral memory, myth, and archetype. When the departed appear in dreams, they might be guiding us towards unresolved conflicts, exposing buried complexes, or delivering insight we can't access while awake.
Which, honestly, that's a little creepier if my unconscious is staging a full-on corpse theater just to let me know I need therapy. Then I'm not only the audience, but the playwright, director, and critic all rolled into one.
You're right. Dream Necromancy forces us to confront the liminal zone where psyche and spirit overlap, where it becomes impossible to tell whether we're speaking to the dead or simply to the deepest parts of ourselves.
So true. So where does that leave us today? Not everyone is engraving talismans in their kitchen at midnight, that's for sure.
Some actually do, surprisingly, but most people adapt the practice to their own context. Jungians, for instance, interpret deceased relatives as archetypes, engaging the psyche rather than the literal dead. Chaos magicians distill intention into sigils, streamlining the ritual. Tibetan dream yogis cultivated lucidity and maintained stability, using dreams as disciplined spiritual practice. And ceremonial magicians still practice astral projection, treating the dreamscape as a navigable realm.
It's fascinating how the methods differ, yet the underlying goal remains the same. Working consciously with dreams as active spaces for insight and transformation.
Right. Across all traditions, the conviction is consistent. Dreams are operative spaces, arenas where one can engage with hidden knowledge, whether through symbolic, psychological, or spiritual means.
And when you put it that way, it really highlights the care and discipline involved. It's not superstition, it's intentional practice, cultivated over generations.
Precisely. Dream necromancy in all its forms is a lineage, a ritual technology. It demands focus, preparation, and respect to be effective and safe.
That's what strikes me most. The depth and continuity of these practices show how seriously people have approached the unseen. It's both rigorous and profoundly meaningful.
Wise engagement is essential. The lessons, the insight, the connection, all of it depends on approaching dreams with intention. We talk a bit about intention in all of our other episodes. In fact, we just discussed it in our prior episode on Reiki healing. Intention really is the gas to fuel this vehicle.
So we're going to share a story about Samuel Sewall now and kind of show you some of the pitfalls of dream necromancy.
Okay, that sounds perfect.
Cool. Listen closely, for the dreams of Samuel Sewall are not ended. They still echo, like the tolling of that ancient bell, carrying across centuries, summoning us, binding us to hear. Thus begins his tale. In the quiet chambers of Boston, where firelight flickered against timbered walls and the harbor wind rattled the shutters, Samuel Sewall kept his journals. Meticulous entries filled with sermons attended, merchants consulted, letters received. But between the lines of neat ink, beneath the scaffold of ordinary days, there moved a hidden script. For at night, when the quills were laid aside and the streets grew still, the veil lifted, and the dead came walking. The first great dream came when he was a young man, still more scholar than magistrate, still weighing what life might demand of him. He dreamed of a vast plain, a land without horizon. The soil there was black as char, and out of it rose thousands of pale hands, clawing upward, reaching skyward, as if desperate to drag him down. He stood upon that plane, robes heavy upon his shoulders, though he had not yet earned them in waking life. And before him appeared his grandfather, the elder Henry Sewall, stern and unyielding, a patriarch clothed in Puritan black.
Samuel,
the figure said, though the voice echoed like it issued from a cavern.
you will sit in judgment, but your hand must not tremble. The living deceives, yet the dead do not. Heed us, and you will wield a truer law than any scripture written by man.
At that, the hands rose higher, clutching, tearing at his garments, their nails raking fire from his flesh. Samuel woke with a cry, the echo of judgment still in his ears, and in the silence of his chamber, he whispered a prayer not to God, but to the ancestral shadow that lingered beside his bed. The dreams grew stranger. Some nights he found himself wandering the salt marshes of the Charles, though in truth he lay in his own bed. There, among reeds that swayed like mourners, figures emerged draped in tattered linen. They beckoned him toward the water, their mouths opening not with breath but with smoke. From the smoke issued names, some he recognized, neighbors, parishioners, acquaintances. Others were yet unknown to him, but in time he would meet them in the flesh. Always the message was the same.
Your hand will decide, your words will condemn or free, and though your lips will tremble, our will must not.
By day, Sewall prayed more fervently. He attended sermons with a zeal that seemed almost desperate, and still, in the hidden chambers of his heart, he feared. For he began to notice, when merchants argued, when neighbors quarreled, when ministers invoked scripture, he already knew how events would unfold. It was as though the dead had whispered outcomes into his ear. He did not tell his wife, nor his friends, nor even his most trusted colleagues. For how could he? To admit that one's wisdom was borrowed from ancestral shadows, to confess that the night itself had tutored him in judgment, would mark him as touched by witchery. And yet, was it not a holy service? Was it not the fulfillment of family duty that he, Samuel, should carry the mantle of the dead? One dream above all haunted him. He found himself standing upon the meeting house steps, the square filled with townsfolk. They pressed forward in hunger, eyes gleaming with fear and anticipation. And beside him, arrayed like a council, stood his ancestors, row upon row, men and women from centuries past. They gazed down at the crowd, and one by one they raised their hands in silent decree. Samuel realized, with a chill like frost through marrow, that he was their mouthpiece. Their sentences, their verdicts would issue from his lips. And as he opened his mouth to speak, he tasted ash, the ash of burned bodies, the ash of rope-frayed gallows. He woke to the sound of a cock's crow, the taste still bitter, his hands trembling as though he had already pronounced death. Thus, before Salem ever called his name, before the year of trials and cries of witchcraft, Samuel Sewall was already marked. Marked by dreams that were not his own, marked by ancestors who claimed his soul, and marked, above all, by the certainty that when judgment came, he would not stand alone. The dead would stand with him, and they would not be merciful. The year was 1692, a year already inked in the ledgers of infamy, a year when Massachusetts, that fragile citadel of Puritan hope, was split by whispers of witchcraft. It began in Salem Village, a fever of accusations, young girls convulsing, neighbors pointing trembling fingers, ministers warning of Satan's snare. But beneath the cries of the afflicted and the thunder of sermons, another current moved, invisible yet inexorable. For Samuel Sewall, dreams had prepared him. Long before the first gallows were built, he had walked the dreamscapes where judgment reigned. Now the waking world bent to match those visions. Night after night, as the trials began to stir, Sewall dreamed of a hall without walls, a vast chamber filled with spectral benches. The accused stood in chains, yet their faces blurred and shifted, sometimes familiar, sometimes strangers yet to come. At the head of this phantom court sat his ancestors. They did not wear wigs or robes, but garments woven of grave cloth. Their eyes gleamed with cold authority.
Samuel,
they intoned.
You are our herald. Your words shall bind the living as ours bind the dead. The world of flesh is blind, but you see through us, you see.
And in the dream, he opened his mouth, pronouncing guilt or innocence, though he never chose. The words came through him like a wind, using his body as reed. When he awoke, he carried the verdict with him. The verse to stand accused in Salem's court, Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, Tituba. Seawall had seen them already, their figures flickering in his nocturnal visions. He remembered the marsh smoke curling into their names, long before their neighbors spoke them aloud. Was this providence? Was this divine foresight? Or was it the darker inheritance his ancestors pressing their justice into the flesh of his mind? Seawall did not ask aloud. He simply sat in judgment, and when he raised his hand, the dead raised theirs in unison. The courtroom in Salem town was a furnace of fear. Spectators thronged, some trembling, some gleeful, all desperate to see the devil unmasked. The afflicted girls shrieked, claiming to see specters clawing at their flesh. Ministers thundered scripture. The judges, Hathorne, Stoughton, Seawall, leaned forward, their faces grave as tombs. But only Seawall knew that another court presided behind them. For each time a name was spoken, he heard a chorus in his skull, ancestral voices confirming, condemning, urging him onward. Each time the accused protested innocence, he saw spectral hands reaching from the dream plane, dragging that soul down into darkness. He did not know if the visions revealed truth or merely reflected the hunger of the dead, but in that fevered year, truth mattered less than certainty, and certainty was what the dreams supplied. As the executions began, Seawall's night grew more violent. He dreamed of gallows swaying, not in Salem, but upon some cosmic stage. The hanged figures dangled like puppets, their feet grazing clouds of ash. Beneath them, his ancestors clapped their skeleton hands, their applause sharp as cracking bones.
Well done, Samuel,
they whispered.
You keep our covenant, you bind the witches, as we bound our enemies before you. You are our sword, our tongue, our air.
But not all dreams brought triumph. One night he dreamed of a woman he had sentenced with the others. Her face was gaunt, yet her eyes blazed like coals. She tore the noose from her neck and strode toward him across the plain of the dead. The ancestors fell silent. She raised a hand, pointing directly at him. Judge, she said, you think yourself righteous, but whose justice do you serve? Yours, God's, or theirs? Samuel awoke screaming. His sheets wound about him like ropes, his throat raw as though he had shouted her name in truth. Still the trials pressed forward. Still more were condemned, and though Samuel's face in court was grave, his inner world was chaos, for he knew, with a terror he dared not confess, that his dreams were no longer separate from the judgments. They had become one. He no longer remembered if he spoke his verdicts because he believed them, or because the voices had spoken first in the night. Thus Salem burned with accusation, and Samuel Seawall sat at its heart, a man bound not only by scripture, nor by colony law, but by the weight of ancestral shadows. By the close of that dreadful year, Samuel Seawall's nights had become war. Not rest, not sleep, but a battleground where flesh and spirit clashed. The ancestors who once whispered softly now commanded with thunder. They no longer appeared as solemn counselors, but as captains arrayed for battle, their spectral armor gleaming with grave dust, their voices a chorus of iron.
You are our blade,
they told him.
Strike as we struck, spare no soul that stands against us. Through you, our will returns to earth.
And against them, rising from the gallows, from the marsh smoke, from the pit of condemned dreams, came the faces of the hanged, their necks bruised, their eyes unblinking, their voices bitter with curses. "Judge," they cried, "you are no servant of God, you are a servant of the grave. You condemn in the name of shadows, and you shall be judged by shadows in turn." Thus did Samuel find himself upon a dream plane, a place where the ground was ash and the sky churned with storm. On one side stood his ancestors arrayed in ranks, their banners woven from funeral cloth, their swords the cold fire of memory. On the other, the souls of the condemned, their chains rattling like drums of war, their fury a wind that stung his skin. And Samuel, in the center, no longer judge, no longer recorder of law, but warrior pressed into service of a lineage too strong to defy. Each night the battle raged. Spectral blades clashed, sparks flew like meteors across the black sky. The condemned hurled accusations, their words arrows tipped with fire. The ancestors advanced, chanting the litany of bloodlines, claiming the right of dominion. Samuel fought, yet he knew not whom he struck, for when he raised his sword, sometimes it cut the air, sometimes it cut the living memory of a woman's scream, sometimes it cut his own soul. He began to lose track of waking hours. In court, he sat pale, his eyes hollow, his lips whispering prayers that sounded more like incantations. At meals, he barely ate, muttering instead the names of ancestors no one else remembered. And in his journals, his neat hand faltered, lines crossing, sentences breaking, as though the page itself resisted his secrets. "This night again I dreamed," he scrawled once, "of soldiers in white and soldiers in black, and I in the middle. My strength faileth me, Lord preserve me." But was it the Lord he prayed to, or the ancestors who crowded his bedside like judges leaning over a guilty man? One night the battle took a darker turn. The condemned grew stronger. Their voices joined in one thunderous cry. "You have no authority over us. Your ancestors are chained as we are chained. Look behind you, judge. See who truly holds the cords." And then Samuel turned. He beheld a figure greater than all others, a shape vast as night itself, cloaked in smoke, its face shifting like 1,000 skulls. The ancestors bowed before it. The condemned recoiled in terror. The figure spoke no word, yet Samuel understood. The true master of these dream battles was not bloodline, not heritage, not God nor devil, but something deeper, a hunger ancient as earth, a hunger that used ancestors and condemned alike as masks. Samuel fell to his knees, his sword vanishing from his hand. The figure reached forth, touching his brow with a finger of ash, and at that touch he felt the weight of all verdicts, all gallows, all graves.
"You are mine,"
the silence said.
"Through dream, through waking, through death itself, you are mine."
When he awoke, his pillow was wet with tears, and for the first time Samuel Sewall doubted whether he had been chosen by God or damned by the dead. But still the trials went on. Still he wore his robe, still he raised his hand, still he condemned. For to refuse would mean betraying not only court and colony, but the dream voices that chained his soul. Thus did Samuel Sewall wage war each night and serve judgment each day. A man torn between shadow and scripture, between the ancestors who demanded loyalty and the condemned who demanded justice. The night battles left him hollow, and soon they would demand their price. The trials ended, the gallows stood silent, ropes frayed by wind and weather, but the memory of their burden lingered like smoke. Salem's fever cooled into shame. The colony stirred uneasily, the ministers argued, and whispers grew louder. Innocents had died. God's justice had been perverted, blood had soaked the earth unjustly, and Samuel Sewall, once so certain, now found his own soul breaking beneath the weight. The dreams did not cease, they grew sharper. Each night the condemned returned, not as a faceless multitude, but as individuals. Sarah Good clutching her infant to her breast. Rebecca Nurse whispering prayers that turned to curses. Giles Corey crushed beneath invisible stones, his last words thundering still.
"More weight.
They came to him in endless procession, their eyes hollow, their mouths silent. They did not accuse, they did not wail. They merely looked at him, and that look was worse than any cry. His ancestors no longer shielded him, their voices dwindled, their authority diminished, and in their place rose the quiet verdict of those he had condemned. At last, in 1697, Sewall could endure no more. He stood before the congregation of Boston's South Church on a cold January day. The minister read aloud his written confession, a public acknowledgement that he had erred in judgment, that the trials had been a grievous sin. As the words echoed through the meeting house, Samuel Sewall bowed his head. He did not speak, he did not lift his eyes. He stood like a man awaiting sentence. The congregation his jury, God his judge. And in that bowed silence, he felt the gaze of the dead upon him, both the ancestors and the condemned all watching, some stern, some sorrowful, all binding him with their eyes. The people said it was noble, this public repentance. They said Sewall had redeemed himself, that he had shown humility where others showed pride. But they did not walk his nights, for in the dreamscapes, his confession was but the opening of a deeper door. Now the ancestors reproached him.
You betrayed us, Samuel. You broke the covenant. You abandoned the sword we placed in your hand.
Now the condemned encircled him. Too late, they whispered. Words cannot unmake ropes. Confessions cannot raise the fallen. You are marked forever. And above them all, the vast figure of ash and shifting skulls returned, its silence more terrible than any curse. It pointed at him with a hand that spanned the horizon, and in that gesture he knew repentance had not freed him. It had only bound him to another fate. His journals, Sewall wrote, of daily events, of weather and commerce, of sermons heard and bread broken. But hidden among those lines, there were moments of trembling honesty. I am afflicted still with dreams, he confessed. I fear the judgment that awaits me, both from heaven above and from the grave below. No sermon, no prayer, no confession could silence the voices. They followed him, as shadows follow the body at dusk, long, stretching, inevitable. And thus Samuel Sewall lived, a man pardoned by men, yet still on trial in the court of dreams. The years passed, Samuel Sewall aged, his beard whitening, his shoulders stooping beneath burdens unseen. He served still in public office, still walked the streets of Boston, still put pen to page in his endless journal. But beneath the mask of duty, his soul drifted closer each day to the dream plane where his battles had never ceased. In those final decades, the dreams deepened into visions of departure. No longer did his ancestors command him, nor did the condemned rail with fury. Instead, they stood waiting, rank upon rank, a silent audience to his last journey. He dreamed of a river wide as eternity, its waters black, its current pulling at his feet. On the far shore, shadows gathered, both the blood of his line and the souls of the hanged, all together now, no longer divided by judgment, but united in expectation.
Come, Samuel,
they whispered, their voices carried not on breath, but on the sighing of the river.
You have wandered long, now the verdict is yours to bear.
On January 1st, 1730, Samuel Sewall's breath at last gave way. The house was hushed, his family gathered close. To them it seemed a peaceful passing, but within his fading mind the dream finally unfurled. He crossed the river, the ancestors reached for him, their hands no longer stern but weary. The condemned gazed upon him, their eyes steady, their silence a verdict. And from the midst of both hosts rose the vast figure of ash and skulls, the one that had marked him years before. It loomed above the river, its hand outstretched.
Samuel,
it intoned.
You are neither saint nor monster. You are the sum of your dreams, and now you shall dwell among them forever.
The river closed over him. The dream was complete. So ends the tale of Samuel Sewall, judge of Salem, penitent of Boston, dreamer bound by both ancestors and condemned. A man who sought repentance yet found no release but in death. And even now, when the wind moves through New England graveyards, when the gallows shadow lengthens across memory, there are those who say they hear the tolling of a bell, calling the living to judgment, echoing the voice of a man who learned too late that dreams are the truest court of all.
Well, I've never heard that story told at all.
Yeah, he's a well-known judge from the era, and his involvement is historically documented, but no one really talks about, what was behind all the decision-making from him.
Somehow we managed to talk about grimoires, necromancers, and Salem, not intentionally.
I feel like that's just natural talent, maybe.
I was listening through the story and I'm kind of wondering, is he really a necromancer though?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because how do you feel about that?
So he wasn't a practitioner and he didn't actively engage in any kind of necromantic practices at all. But it's more like an ancestral type magic. So maybe necromancy is like a branch of ancestral magic. If that makes sense. So
yeah.
So same but different?
No, I do think there's a lot of crossover with the two.
Right.
I do feel that way. But I it's funny that you say you don't feel like he was a necromancer, because I think I actually do feel like maybe it wasn't specifically stated, but I do think he had necromantic tendencies, if you can put it that way. Because I do feel like he was at one point going to bed maybe in order to get some sort of guidance from these ancestral figures.
I mean, he was getting them from the dreams, but that still could be, just seen as ancestral magic.
Yeah. Well, I guess, so can Dream Necromancy, in a way, in some version. Not all Dream Necromancy, of course.
It's just weird. Because he actively wasn't pursuing it. It was just happening to him. Like, he was maybe more intuitive and open to it, but he was a religious guy.
Yeah.
So he's kind of sketch.
He's very sketch.
Because he was condemning people for essentially what he was doing.
What he was himself involved in. Yeah, exactly. And I don't think maybe at the end he was doing it intentionally, but I think it still counts as dream necromancy, even if he wasn't smart enough to have some sort of dismissal, process within his practice. So.
Okay.
I guess that's how I feel about that, but.
I can see what you're talking about.
You know what I'm saying? But it does make me think maybe that's why this subject feels so alive to us, because it isn't locked in the past. People are still experimenting with it, whether consciously or not. Even something as simple as dreaming of a relative after they've passed. It's a very human experience.
Right, and traditions would argue that those dreams aren't meaningless. They could be messages, or at the very least, symbolic dialogues with aspects of ourself or with the collective unconscious. Jung would say the dead in dreams embody archetypes, ancestral figures that bring us into contact with deeper parts of our psyche.
Which I think in Samuel Sewall's case, maybe Jung would probably view that whole situation as him just having a conscious that was in turmoil because of the events that he was instigating.
I could see that.
I do find it powerful because it suggests there's a responsibility in paying attention to what comes through in dreams. Whether you interpret it as psyche or spirit, either way, the content deserves more than dismissal.
Precisely. Necromancers always emphasize verification. The same dream appearing over and over, or messages validated by others, carried more weight. It was never just, I dreamed something once, so it must be true. It was rigorous.
And that rigor is what I think a lot of people miss when they hear necromancy. They imagine graveyards, torches, wild spectacles, But what you've laid out is closer to discipline, like a meditative or scientific process.
That's an important distinction. These weren't thrill seekers. They were scholars, monks, mystics. The dream was safer than digging up a corpse, but it still demanded preparation, fasting, purification, ritual space. It was about creating the conditions for contact.
That does lead me to wonder if someone today wanted to approach their dreams in that spirit, not literally engraving talismans, but with seriousness, what would they learn from these traditions?
They could learn structure, first of all, keeping a dream journal, practicing lucidity, approaching sleep intentionally. They could learn restraint. Not every dream is a revelation, but repeated patterns deserve attention. And they could learn respect for themselves, for their unconscious, or for whatever they believe lies beyond.
Yeah, that resonates with me. Because even without summoning ancestors, treating dreams as meaningful shifts, how you live your waking life, suddenly you're in dialogue with something larger, whether that's your psyche, your lineage, or the collective unconscious, like you said.
And that dialogue has always been the essence of necromancy. It's less about controlling the dead and more about listening.
Listening, that actually does feel like the perfect word to end on. Because when I think about all of this, it makes me want to listen more carefully to my own dreams, and maybe not for ancestral warnings, but for guidance or anything I'd otherwise overlooked.
And that's the invitation for our audience as well. Don't dismiss your dreams. They may be the oldest and most personal form of ritual communication you'll ever have.
Beautifully said. This has been such a fascinating journey through history, psychology, and practice. And really, we've only just begun.
Indeed, there's far more to uncover. Ritual manuals, cross-cultural parallels, even modern experiments with group dreaming.
Which means there's plenty waiting for us in future episodes. But for tonight, I think we can leave our listeners with this. Approach your dreams with intention, and you may find more than rest waiting for you.
And dream responsibly when exploring spaces beyond the walls of waking consciousness.
And for our part, we'll keep listening carefully, both to the dreams and to the wisdom they carry. Until next time, dreamers, keep dreaming and
join us in discovering what may lie beyond the walls of sleep.